The Argentine government will send Maduro information on Macri and Trump's alleged plan to invade Venezuela. In Brazil, the death toll resulting from heavy rains and landslides in Petropolis has risen to 117. Russia's government denounced the increase in Ukrainian provocations near Donbass in the last 24 hours, while the UN Security Council and the NATO nations meet simultaneously to discuss the tensions in the region. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The Argentine government announced it will send Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro Moros information on Macri and Trump's alleged plan to invade Venezuela. The Argentinian Minister of Defense, Jorge Tayana, spoke with his Venezuelan counterpart, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, and informed him about the internal investigation by the ministry regarding the Puma operation, allegedly designed to militarily invade Venezuela. The operation was exposed by a report based on secret military intelligence documents, which revealed that in 2019, Macri committed the armed forces to a possible U.S. military intervention in Venezuela, for which military maneuvers were carried out on Argentine soil between April and July of last year. On Thursday, the president of the Venezuela's National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, offered a press conference where he denounced the government of Colombia's funding of the terrorist groups to destabilize the country. The head of parliament stressed he has denounced on more than 20 occasions attacks from Colombia against Venezuela. Rodriguez assured Colombian drug trafficking has infiltrated Venezuelan criminal gangs, supplying them with weapons and training these groups. He also denounced that the government of Iván Duque and Venezuelan ultra-right wing use social networks to discredit the accusations made by the Venezuelan government about the links of these armed gangs with drug trafficking and paramilitarism. Likewise, the National Assembly's President Jorge Rodriguez highlighted all the armament of the criminal gangs in Venezuela comes from Colombian paramilitary groups and drug traffickers.
All the weapons of the delinquency that exist in Venezuela, all the weapons of the paramilitary groups and drug traffickers in our western border and our southern border, all come from Colombia. Of course, the big supplier of weapons to the criminals of the planet, the United States of America. From the United States to Colombia, and from Colombia to arm the Coqui gang, to arm the Rabbit gang, to arm the Maloney gang, and to arm the Aragua train. We already have undeniable proof.
Also, Congressperson Rodriguez disclosed the complicity of Colombian migration agencies in allowing Venezuelan criminals to enter Colombian territory and receive paramilitary training.
On the other hand, a second modality is the complicity of the Colombian migration agencies. Don't you remember how those who brought drones and explosives to try to assassinate President Maduro entered the country? They received identity documents. They were brought and taken with the consent of the maximum migration authority of Colombia, who also confessed it in a direct way. They hit that gentleman, the one who was head of Colombian migration, and who was identified by the perpetrators of the assassination attempt against President Maduro, that he was the one who provided them with identity documents.
President Daniel Ortega and the Vice President Rosario Murillo met with the delegation from the Federation of Russia. Ortega referred to the current situation in Ukraine and reiterated the commitment to reach an understanding between the parties, while sending a fraternal embrace to the Russian people and its president, Vladimir Putin. The Russian Vice Minister, Yuri Borisov, said that the main objective of his visit is to strengthen trade relations between the two countries. The Eurasian countries' delegation includes ministers, deputy ministers, experts in economic development, finance, industry, trade, defense, energy, protection, and human welfare. In Panama, a protest took place this Thursday in front of the public ministry to demand sanctions for those responsible for the abuse of minors in transit homes. The Movement for the Defense of Children and Adolescents demanded that the prosecutor in charge, Javier Caraballo, resign from his post if he was not able to move forward with the investigation. Demonstrators asked the authorities to look into the results of the complaints previously presented. They also indicated that rallies will not cease until the expected results are obtained. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. In Brazil, the latest report from the Civil Defense reported on Thursday night the death toll had risen to 117 following the heavy rains in the city of Petrópolis. Through its account on the social network Twitter, Civil Defense indicated that up to 8 p.m. local time, there were 117 dead, 24 people were rescued alive, another 849 remain homeless, and some 323 landslides were reported. According to the authorities, among the number of dead, at least 65 are women and 36 are men, while some 13 minors are also among the bodies found. The civil police estimates that more than 116 people are still missing. The disaster on the city of Petrópolis is already said to be the biggest weather catastrophe in Brazil by the Center of Forecasts and Climate Change Studies. From Petrópolis, our correspondent André Vieira expands on this.
A city destroyed by the force of water. On Wednesday, a day before recording the largest volume of rain in a 24-hour period since 1956, the residents of Petrópolis, a mountainous region in Rio de Janeiro, and the public forces work to find those still missing. Dozens lost their lives, and the number of people buried underneath the mud and the rubble is unknown. Daniel Doval's house was destroyed on account of a mudslide, and this afternoon he went back to try to recover what's left intact of the disaster. Electricity began to fail, and when I managed to see, the whole canyon has fell off. It's the second time something like this happened. This Tuesday afternoon, the whole amount of rain expected for February fell in only 3 hours. The water gathered around the barriers, dragging along houses and cars that were lost in rivers. The mud gorged into shops and left the historic town of Petrópolis in ruins. The material damages can be repaired with time, but the sadness of each of the residents is mainly due to the losses of loved ones. The Center of Forecast and Climatic Studies deems these floods and mudslides the biggest weather catastrophe suffered by Brazil.
There are neighbors of mine who were buried alive in the mud. Today we were there for hours trying to find bodies out of the rubble. It takes a lot of time. Sadly, this is all real.
I live here in this square for 30 years, and I've never seen something like it. The people who live here in this square, we have lost many of our neighbors and friends. Cars were destroyed, just like our houses. Here in this house, we are up and working since 3 a.m., helping one another. Faria was one of the salespeople affected in Pasteur Square, one of the locations most ravaged by the rains. This afternoon, she managed to pull up the strength to clean up her place of business and reopen it to serve the community.
I've been around here for 23 years and I've never saw such a thing. It's the first time in my life. I was very scared because just yesterday we were in the store and it was all mud over the knees. Sadly, there wasn't much you could do about it. People were shouting, falling from the mountain cliffs. We just couldn't do anything about it.
Petrópolis has a track record of tragedies.
In a similar disaster back in 1988, there were 134 deaths, and in 2011 the fatalities rose to almost 1,000 due to storms. For the residents, the intensity of the rains is increasing with the passing of the years. Extreme weather events are on the rise at the same time the deforestation rates in the Amazon reached their worst figures in 10 years. In 2021 alone, 10,362 square kilometers of the Amazonian jungle were destroyed, which makes it the worst environmental issue for Brazil. It has never rained so much. To me, it's all a consequence of deforestation. People don't measure the effects of their actions or just don't care. Then, we're the ones struck paying for their negligence, ignorance or greed. They mess with nature, and we are the ones who pay for it. In the past 2 months, Brazil recorded heavy rains in different states of the country simultaneous to the worst drought in the last 17 years to hit Rio Grande do Sul. These are signs that the climate emergency takes its toll on the lack of structural planning in the cities.
André Vieira e Sebastião Soto, Telesur, Brasil.
Thank you, Andrea, for the report. And now we continue to other topics. In Bolivia, a group of former ministers from former President Evo Morales' government denounced a new campaign of judicial persecution sponsored by the right-wing sectors. During the last few weeks, the accusations against former and current authorities such as Evo Morales, Álvaro García Linera, David Choquehuanca, Teresa Morales, among others, have intensified amid the situation that indicated not having links to alleged crimes such as drug trafficking. A group of 35 former officials assured that accusations against them are part of a smear campaign. In Colombia, the electoral campaign for the legislative elections on March 13th gains momentum. In the last hours, the candidates to the Congress of Colombia appeared with greater frequency in the streets, squares, media and social networks with the aim of attracting the largest number of voters. According to the registry officer, 38 million Colombians are eligible to participate in the legislative elections, in which 296 congresspersons, 108 senators and 108 representatives to the Chamber of Deputies will be elected. And precisely, Colombia's Ombudsman Office alerted this Tuesday that 274 municipalities are in extreme risk of rights violation in Colombia, ahead of the electoral processes called to the next months, and urged the state to take preventive actions urgently. The causes of the risk came from the possibility of armed strike, gun plans, threats, attacks against public forces, the Ombudsman Office detailed, but also electoral officials, candidates, citizens or human rights defenders are also at risk. According to the institution, the report is made with the aim to alert the state and also to impose a quick and effective answer to the institutionality ahead of the risk of rights violation. In Belgium, citizens from different African countries, those residing in the European nation, protested to denounce their nation's situation within the framework of the recent summit between the European Union and the African Union. Citizens of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Comoros and other nations blocked the access to the European Council to reject what they qualified as the fueling of conflicts in the region by foreign powers. In turn, protesters rejected the steps of various heads of African states, while condemned the rise of violence in the Ethiopian region of Tigray. The Malian junta's Director of Information and Public Relations says the group welcomes the departure of the Burkina and Takuba forces from Mali after France announced on Thursday it was withdrawing its troops from the country.
If we look back at the presence of these forces on the ground, I think Barkhane came in January 2030. From January 2030 to the present day, look at what has been done. What has the country gained from the presence of the Barkhane force? If the problem has not worsened, I think we have not had a military solution. It's true that you may be worried, but Mali is not alone, and Mali will not remain alone. France may leave, European countries may leave, but I'm not despairing. Let's give time to time, and you'll see what happens.
In May, Niger, after the announcement of the withdrawal of the French and European forces from Mali, reactions are mixed. In Niger, one of the countries that has faced attacks by jihadist groups often based in Mali for years. In this regard, on one hand, a member of the rights NGO Tournons la Page believes that the presence of foreign forces was useless, illegal and illegitimate, and on the other, a Nigerian journalist considers that the terrorist groups are congratulating themselves following the withdrawal. The announcement on Mali came ahead of the two-day summit of the EU and African leaders in Brussels, which seeks to strengthen ties with pledges of new investments for a continent where China and Russia are making inroads.
Today we have established that the presence of foreign forces on Malian territory is irrelevant because after 9 years of existence we can only talk of flaws and failures. So we cannot continue to sit back and watch this useless, illegal and illegitimate presence. We believe that this is today a situation of great concern, a great question, which is left for both Mali's neighbors, i.e. Niger and particularly Burkina Faso, who are suffering the full force of this insecurity. So we think that the European Union, France and Mali's neighbors should take steps to ensure that the vacuum left in the north of Mali is taken care of.
In Khartoum, protests continue for months now. Sudan has plunged into turmoil with near daily street protests since the October takeover by the military. On Thursday, Sudanese security forces used the tear gas to disperse protesters who once again rose up against the coup. This change of power upended Sudan's transition to democratic rule that began after 3 decades of isolation under former President Omar al-Bashir. Demonstrators demand the establishment of a fully civilian government to lead the transition. This time, the protests came as the United Nations envoy to Sudan visited the capital for talks. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Russia, the government denounced the increase in Ukrainian provocations near Donbass in the last 24 hours, while the UN Security Council and the NATO nations meet simultaneously to discuss the tensions in the region. Russian Presidential Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov said that Kiev intensified in the past 24 hours its provocative actions near the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic, and described it as a very dangerous situation. In Russia, the Federation announced the ouster of the deputy head of the United States diplomatic mission in Moscow, Bart Gorman. Bart Gorman was the second most important official at the United States Embassy in Moscow. The Russian Foreign Ministry indicated that the move comes in response to multiple hostile actions recently taken by the White House against his country. Washington stated that it will evaluate its response to the situation. This impasse comes amidst tensions between Washington and Moscow over Ukraine. And the tension escalates in the Donbass. At least 4 armed attacks were recorded in the region on Thursday, as authorities of the self-proclaimed Republic of Lugansk claimed that the territory was shelled. In the midst of an escalation of media coverage of a possible invasion, and in contrast to the declarations of the Russian government, armored attacks were reported on Thursday in the border region without their origin having been confirmed. The European representative Joseph Borrell assured that there have been bombings in the east of Ukraine, for which he blamed Moscow, at the same time that he questioned the withdrawal of Russian troops from the so-called line of contact. Mexico raised a plea to the United Nations Security Council to end the tensions in the east of Ukraine and to find a negotiated solution within the framework of the Minsk agreements signed in 2014 and 2015. In this regard, Mexican authorities stated that the Minsk agreements are the mechanism to find a negotiated solution to tensions in the east of the country 8 years after its beginning. In turn, Mexico called to the parties to facilitate the humanitarian access in the area in a safe and unrestricted manner, and to ensure the free movement to the observation mission of the organization, to the security and European cooperation. We have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.